That was a stark transition here. Thanks everyone for putting in your favorite AC/DC song. We thought we would get the vibes high to start off this morning. My name is Dawn Myers. I'm the corporate marketing manager here at Pivot. We're here to talk about research, and Pivot is a marketing and CX agency, but research is one of our core competencies. And actually, when Pivot first started 20 years ago, we were called Pivot Research and Marketing, which I just learned this morning. If you're here, we assume it's because you saw our recent white paper called How to Use Community Insights to Understand Growth Opportunities and Maximize Take Rates. Now, I will go ahead and put a link in the chat shortly so you can pull that up if you would like. But the bottom line is that we think research is important, and we want to shed some light on, first, how we at Pivot use research to help our clients, and then second, what actually makes good and accurate research. Today, we have Steve Boespflug, our Senior Insight Manager, and CEO Dave Nieuwstraten to go over the white paper and also just add in some additional insights. Steve oversees all of our research projects here at Pivot and has 30 years of experience in market research. Prior to joining Pivot, he was a principal of 2 research companies and worked directly with a few small companies like HP, 3M, Intel, Cisco, and Microsoft. Steve grew up in Minot, North Dakota, and he knows what it's like to live in a smaller community, so he can really relate to a lot of our clients and probably a lot of you tuning in. Dave is our CEO and actually a researcher himself. He completed the AMA School of Market Research at Notre Dame and is regularly involved in our research projects here at Pivot. A couple admin things here before I go dark. Go ahead and use the chat throughout the webinar. We might not get to your question until the very end, or Steve and Dave might want to answer it on the spot, but just use the chat for that. And then I think we have the Q&A box too if you want it to be anonymous. We will do the Q&A at the end, and the recording will be sent out after the webinar, probably by the end of this week. So you can forward it to anyone at your organization and rewatch it if you like. With that said, I'm going to hand it over to Dave.
Awesome. Thank you, Dawn. And wow, we were thrilled to see so many people interested in this topic. We expected 30 or so people wanting to join, and we just blew way past that number. So obviously hit on something of interest and of value. And so thank you for taking time out of your schedule. See a lot of friends and clients in the attendee list and others that I haven't met yet. So look forward to meeting you. You're busy, so our goal here is to provide a webinar that's of great value to you and worth the time that you're giving us. So we'll look forward to diving in. Steve, you want to launch the slide deck, and we'll go ahead and get started. Again, you can give us questions in the chat, or you can drop them into the Q&A. I've had the opportunity to work with Steve for many years, and my goodness, I don't believe there is a better, more experienced, more skilled researcher in our industry. Done hundreds of studies across the gamut, but also we used to do a lot of studies for big, Fortune 500 type analyst firms, and Steve would be the primary on those. Gartner is one, or we would do a lot of studies for Gartner. And they put their name on it, but that just again speaks to the credentials and capabilities of our team. So I'll let Steve get that. Are the slides up?
Oh, is it not showing?
I don't see them.
It says it's sharing. Okay, let me try this again.
I can see it.
Oh, perfect. Great. That's just me then. It's usually a me issue, Steve. It's just usually a me issue. So the best thing for most things is for me to just chime in and then get out of the way. So let's dive in. Today's webinar, one of the things that we all see in the industry is there's a lot of competition. The industry has certainly changed. All this funding that is flowing and has flowed and is projected to flow has brought a lot of attention to opportunities and threats, and research is something that can help with both of those things. So moving out of area, expanding opportunities. So many of you have done an amazing job serving your communities and giving them connectivity and services they wouldn't get at the size of the community they are without you as an organization. Now with this new funding, there's other adjacent communities that are either clamoring for you to come in and help them and do the same thing, or you're looking out and seeing some real opportunities with unserved or underserved. So that's one area where we're seeing a lot of demand for research to help make some smart decisions there. And then there's some new opportunities, whether it be new products. One in particular that we're going to spend some time talking about is the MVNO, reselling mobile as an opportunity. So today we're going to talk a little bit about those growth opportunities. We're going to give you some real case examples, and then we're going to give you some very specific tips on how to have effective research. So let's talk a little bit more about those growth opportunities. In the industry today, when you just look at moving out of area, some organizations have maybe one opportunity. Many have multiple opportunities, and some people are actually looking geographically farther than we even might have expected originally. So how do you go about making decisions about whether you should enter a market or if you should, which markets might be best? And Steve will kind of hit on that. But broadband funding is and what it's bringing as far as an opportunity is a big key factor in that everyone's talking about today. And then MVNO also. So I love the fact that Steve's going to dive into those case studies, and I just we'll jump into that after Steve has some opening thoughts about customer insights. So Steve.
All right. All right, thanks, Dave. Yeah, research involves many details, and we're trying to highlight what's most important today, most important message. And I'm really passionate about my craft of research, and I think it involves details that many important details, but some people may not think they're that important. I'll probably get into the weeds for some of you a little bit, but these are things that I think are very important for good research. But the most important message that we'd like you to take away from today is, to successfully capitalize on growth opportunities, you should first hear from the communities that you're targeting. We've had clients come to us after, well after construction is finished, and they want to do research to find out why take rates aren't what they expected. And so doing research before expanding will give you those answers and let you know the details about what you're up against. Another important point, a very important point that I touched on, is to make sure your research is done the right way. It needs to be accurate, number one, representative, number two, and actionable, number three. Bad data can lead to bad decisions. And of course, it can waste some time and money. These are big investments, so you obviously want to do it right. Whether you do the research yourself, or you use us to do it, or you use someone else, we're going to share how we do it to get the results you can count on. That's what we're sharing today.
Awesome, Steve. One of the things that I love about the content you've put together is you've got some actual case studies, and you hit on those two in the white paper. What we found is people really love case studies. Let's talk about real projects. And you've got 3 here that you're going to walk through, which is great. The first 2 walk through, this scenario where you're looking to move out of area, expand geographically, and looking at what the opportunity might look like. So I look forward to that, and I'll let you kind of walk through a couple of those case studies of potential new market opportunities.
All right, you got it. In our first example, our client was looking to expand in at least one of 4 communities with their fiber network. Populations range from 15,000 to 60,000, and these communities were located up to 100 miles away from headquarters. Each one had a different incumbent provider, 2 of which were the large national tier 1 providers. And the methodology that we used was phone interviews. That's the most efficient way to reach households in smaller communities. There usually aren't enough emails available in smaller communities to do an online survey. There are large national survey panels that you can use, but they're really only effective when you use them in major metro areas and of course the nation as a whole. So we need to get a phone list. And then response rates, regular mail can work, but response rates are typically pretty low. Kind of depends on how many addresses you have to get the right response rate, the right sample size. Door to door is also an option, but it's expensive and it takes a lot of time. The findings from this particular study led to a decision to go with one community to start with, to prioritize that community for expansion. 52%, so just over half, said they would likely switch to our client service if they were to expand to their area. Current provider satisfaction scores, we always ask about their current provider. It's important to get that sentiment to kind of ground them to where they're at today. Current provider scores were low, satisfaction average of 6 to 7 rating, and a net promoter score of -23. Those are really low. So that gives an indication that they're relatively, they're open to a new provider. Let's just say that. And then also awareness of our client was highest in this community. So they had a leg up in terms of marketing and getting the word out. And then the results today, just checked on it recently. At the start of this year, their service was available to 300 homes, and today they have almost 120 installed or are waiting to be installed. That's about 40%, and it's good. It's going to reach that 52% level and probably surpass that. It usually takes about a year, at least a year, to reach the forecasted levels, is what we found out. It's kind of the pattern that we're seeing.
Good information.
Now, the second study, our research for this client had a different outcome. They were looking at one community for expansion, and we did 65 phone interviews. Population was small. Now is about 2,500 in the population, and we were able to procure about 700 phone numbers. And so to get 65 completed phone interviews, that's pretty normal. That a completion percentage of 10% is kind of the rule of thumb, give or take. So when we hear that a community's population is over 2,000, we know that it's feasible to do some phone survey work in that area. Findings that led to their decision: only 29% said they would likely switch to our client. Satisfaction scores were well above average, 8.5 to 9.5 on a satisfaction rating average. That's high. The net promoter score 46, that's above average. Not really well above average, but it's pretty solid. More than 2/3 said current internet performance is fine. We have a number of questions to get at current internet performance, and 2/3, roughly over 60% said everything's going well. So this led to a no-go decision. It turned out that in this case, it wasn't the right community.
Awesome. I'm watching over here a little bit, Steve, for some questions that come up. I think some of the questions will be answered as you get into some of the tips, which is great. Segueing over to a different type of research project. So you hit on a couple of projects that you've been able to do tied to market expansion and moving into new areas. One of the other really interesting things that's happening in our industry is this emergence of a new bundle that takes internet and mobile and puts them together. And man, I remember when we were talking about double play and triple play, right? And that used to be voice, video, and internet service, and we were working on that, and we had to have that to compete. Many of us felt like that was the stakes to compete, and now what we've really seen is that, especially with streaming and how that's come in, and the decline of voice, that's not the table stakes anymore. And so there's a lot of a la carte offerings. A lot of companies have gone into new markets just with internet only, without the voice components or the video components. And so, but what's emerged here is cable companies in particular responded to things like 5G, where the cellular providers can offer internet service, and the cable companies coming in and saying, hey, we're gonna do white label, we're gonna get internet service from one of the major cellular carriers. We're going to brand it as our own, and we're going to package that together. And we're going to offer that double play of internet and cellular or mobile service into our market, offering a discount on one or the other, and make that a compelling reason for people to switch. So, we've had years and years of speed promos and offers that this is a new offer to try to get the attention in the marketplace. And the reality is they're doing really well with it. The take rates on that have gone well. So now you have smaller carriers, tier 2, tier 3, rural providers saying, hey, can we play in that market also? And so they're looking at this, MVNO is what it's called, offering. NRTC has one of those offerings. If you're interested in, you've had the opportunity to work with a client that was looking to study that demand and see, is this something we should offer? Is there any demand? And they wanted to use research to just get insights from the customer. Would you unpack that project a little bit, Steve?
Yeah. One of the things that you alluded to is that with our rural broadband clients, they do a really good job with customers. I mean, with customer service, they're local, they're involved in the community. And that really gives them an advantage, especially over the large national companies, much like, internet service. And so that's something that led to a pretty strong interest in a cell phone service by their internet provider. In this case, we did the study with 4,500 people who each completed an online survey spread across 45 rural communities. And there were more than 20 cell phone carriers across those 4,500 people. So key findings, 51% would consider switching cell phone service to their internet provider. Only 12% said they wouldn't likely. That means they probably would not or definitely would not. And then 37% were on the fence. So that's 88% potential, really, if you consider those who are unsure, somewhere between half and 88%. So it's very good. And like I said, I mean, if the provider is doing a great job with internet service, why not consider bundling cell phone service with that provider that you are loyal to and is doing a good job for you? The most important factors in the decision to switch were a competitive price and value at 68%, and then coverage and reception. Those are kind of the common sense, obvious things that are important for a cell phone customer. But as I mentioned, though, there's certainly a customer support factor that goes into that. That's kind of a table stakes or a given for these folks in the context of this study. One of the things we learned is that MVNO carriers received a much higher satisfaction rating than the MVNO carriers or the MNO carriers, sorry. The MNO carriers are, you can probably imagine who those are. They're the top 3 in the country. And so what this is showing us here is that, those major carriers are more vulnerable to losing customers to a new MVNO offering by an internet provider. So there's some strong vulnerability there. So you can expect some of those people to switch over, certainly. 72% of the subscribers to MVNO carriers gave a high rating, an 8 to 10 on the 10-point scale, versus just over half for the MNO carriers.
So Steve, can you go back to that real quick? Couple of things. One is your ethics as a researcher, which I love, is you're gonna get the data, you're gonna get great data, and you're gonna tell a client what it says. And if it says this is a good market to get into, that's what the data shows. You'll say that, and if it doesn't look good, you'll say that too. I think when I saw these numbers, they were higher than I thought. 50% would consider switching their cell phone service to their local internet provider if they offered that bundle. That was surprising to me. Like you said, you add that to the unsure, which and it's closer to 88%. Can you go over to the 72%, 54%, and so the MNO, just want to make sure that the audience understands what they're looking at here. So the satisfaction level in this study, in this market, and every market's going to be different, but in this study, the big traditional cellular companies, their satisfaction rating on that 8, 9, 10 rating was about 54%. And existing MVNOs that are already operating in that market. So those are some of maybe we've seen some of those radio commercials, those TV commercials, and those are existing MVNOs that were in this market, and they had a higher satisfaction rating. Does I have that correct?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it boils down to value, perceived value. The subscribers to the big players, relatively speaking, not all of them are dissatisfied, obviously, but the ones who are, it tends to come down to value, and that boils down to the trade-off between mainly coverage, the reception versus price, and those are the two, the two elements, the two factors that are most important. But the MVNO carriers in the rural areas have that dialed in a little bit better.
So they're bringing other things to the table too, for whether it be brand or customer satisfaction, local presence, et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
So again, I'm going to look over here and be tracking questions. Be sure to drop them into the Q&A or into the chat. But what we want to transition to is kind of the heart of the white paper, which is for those of you who are looking at moving out of area, looking at new product offerings. It could be MVNO, it could be something else. How do you make sure you have good data to make those important decisions? We're talking about some significant strategic moves, significant investments. So how do you make sure you have good insights that if you're going to make decisions, that insights that are reliable and accurate? So I love that your white paper gets into some tips. Your first one is around sampling, and can you unpack that for us?
Yeah, you bet. So these are the nitty-gritty details of research, and this is where my passion for my craft comes in. And in my experience, a lot of folks don't place enough weight on these factors, these tips that I'm going to go through, but they're really important from my perspective. And believe me, in 30 years in the industry, I've made some mistakes along the way, and those mistakes have branded in my brain. Don't do that again. So over 30 years, you can imagine, I've learned how important these tips are. The first thing to do, and it's extremely important, is to accurately define the population, including all segments, types of demographics, which can vary, locations, where they're located. We always find differences by different little communities and even sometimes neighborhoods and subdivisions, and then competitor presence. So you want to get good representation of the folks that have the providers that you're going up against. So you want to make sure you hear from those people. And then for demographics, it's usually age groups. There's the most difference by age group, and then also household size. If it's a family of four, you've got a lot more internet activity, especially if the younger ages are approaching teenage years. So there's a lot of influence on internet activity when it comes to households. And then as far as sample size goes, that's a common question we get. What kind of sample size do I need to be representative? And the answer to that really is the larger the better. The larger the sample size, the more confidence we have in the accuracy of the findings. And for phone surveys in new markets, we're a little bit limited. So we're constrained a little bit by the available numbers based on the population size. We've had sample sizes in our studies that range from as small as 35 to as large as 500 when it comes to phone surveys. Online surveys are different, but when we're doing new markets, we're doing phone surveys. So 500 is a good sample size for a phone interview project. And it all depends, it depends a lot on the number of communities you're trying to represent. So if we think of the 500 across, 3 communities, that splits it up, and you try to get like 3 equal numbers, sample sizes per community. Another thing that's important is the list source, choosing the right list source. We've got a good one, and what they do is they match phone numbers to location addresses. So if you have a list of addresses of non-customers, you can provide that. We can match it up with the phone numbers. And I mentioned the ratios a little bit earlier, where let's see, what was it about for the community of 2,500, about 700 numbers available. So They can match up to about half sometimes of communities, but sometimes it's down to a third. And you can also, another way, if you don't have a list of addresses, you can define the geographic boundaries on a map. And our list partner and some list partners will find phone numbers and match them to all addresses within those boundaries. You would create what's called a KMZ or KM file, provide us with that, and then our partner can then match up the phone numbers to those to the locations within those boundaries.
So, we think about that case study you shared where you studied a market and it didn't look like it would be a good market to go into. It wouldn't be a good business decision to go into that. But I think about somebody even get to that point. Well, I'm glad they decided to do the research, because if they would have just launched into that market, I think they'd really be struggling. Right. So they made that decision to do and get that information. But they must have had already some inkling. Either people were talking to them that there's an opportunity there. What I love about what you shared about sampling is making sure you really get a good sample, hear from the right people, and use that to make your decisions, versus just some anecdotal. So talking to the right people and how to do that is an important step, number one. But then what's the right way what's the question set look like? Asking the right questions in the right way is also very important. So share your thoughts on that, please, Steve.
Yes. That's another thing that might seem like common sense. Of course, you got to design your questions the right way. Sometimes you overestimate your ability to design a question, and I've seen that a lot. Most people design a question based on how they themselves would understand it, without considering the range of people and that they're immersed in their own lives and varying education levels and just exposure to life. They interpret questions differently, and that's one of the things that I do when I'm designing a question series, is consider that. Just consider all walks of life and the different ways you can interpret a question. And then plus, over the years, I've just learned to get the right design to make sure it's actually interpreted similarly across the highest percentage of people. And so that's really the goal. Yeah, I mean, some people may not interpret it properly, but the goal is to get the vast majority, at least 80%, interpreting it the same way. Let's see. Okay. Be mindful of question sequence. That's another important thing. When you think about a question series that includes a mix of open-ended ends and closed-ended questions, if you want to get top of mind perceptions, you want to ask that right away, because you want to get those top of mind perceptions without them being prompted by certain attributes or elements of questions that are later in the survey. So it's very important to do that. And then you narrow it to more specific prompts. So you start broad with open end, maybe some broader closed-ended questions, then you narrow it down as you go along. And then also staggering easy questions with difficult ones. That's important to minimize survey fatigue and fatigue on the caller as well, the interviewer. It helps with that. People answering easy questions quick, and then maybe a more difficult, longer one after the easy ones. Open ends, also very important to support the quantitative, and that's really kind of the bread and butter in our surveys for when it comes to understanding growth opportunities. Getting those open ends, enough details that they fill in the gaps that closed-ended questions kind of leave behind. If it's all closed-ended questions, you might have more questions at the end when you have the analysis done. And then also verbatim responses. We encourage our clients to go through all of those. We provide the data file, and there's some detail, there's some golden nuggets in those verbatims.
Steve,
On
that open ends, you talked about closed end and open end for the non-research professional. Can you define that? And is there too many open ends that you can have? I mean, what is an example of an open end question?
Oh, an open end would be so closed ended would be, how would you rate your satisfaction on this 1 to 10 scale? And then a follow-up, if they rated, like a 7 or lower, what keeps you from giving a higher rating? And then conversely, what do you like or appreciate most about your provider is another good open end. Then we ask the question, what is your impression of this provider? It could be their own provider that they use,
Mm,
be a competitor that they're aware of. So we find out how familiar they are with the competitor. What's your impression of them? How would you
yeah,
describe your impression? So those are some good, popular, common, open-ended questions that we ask.
excellent. Thank you, Steve.
And then another thing to do is to consider benchmark data that's out there that others are compiling, maybe nationally or even regionally, that that like we do. And then you need to design the questions exactly the same way if you're going to compare your data to the benchmark data. We track a benchmark for Net Promoter Score. We ask this question uh, in every survey. The question is, how likely would you be to recommend your provider to a friend or coworker or colleague on a 1 to 10 scale? And the Net Promoter Score, in case you don't know, is computed by taking the percentage you give a 9 or 10 rating, and you subtract the people who give a 1 to 6 rating. We call the 9 to 10 rating people promoters and the 1 to 6 rating people detractors, because they detract from the positivity toward your brand. But the average that we've seen over the years, and it's been tracked about 6 years now, is 41. It's ticking upward. It used to be around a 36. 70s, something in the 70s is considered excellent. Anything 70 or higher is excellent, but it's rare. But recently we saw a 78. I had a project that produced a 78 Net Promoter Score, so which was the best I've ever seen. And then fiber typically earns that higher NPS. If it's 0 or lower, of course, much improvement is needed. But the range of our clients, the rural broadband providers, has been 8 to 78 now. But I guess one of the main points to close the loop on that is to make sure that your question matches the question used to create the benchmark data if you want to compare. An example of that is our Net Promoter Score always refers to internet service. How likely would you be to recommend your provider's internet service rather than the provider in general? We've asked it both ways, but the benchmark question is based on specifically internet service. So we're comparing apples to apples. And then one thing that I want to show you too is the national numbers. Rural broadband providers, our clients, compared to the industry, various industries here, is between online entertainment and online shopping, 41. So, but I think the main thing to compare it to is the national tier 1 providers, which is below 0. I think at the time of this measurement, it may have been a year and a half to 2 years ago, and I think it's ticked up slightly, but not much. I think I've seen sources show about a -1, so gone up 2 points. But yeah, so rural providers do a great job.
Thank you, Steve. That's a lot of great information and advice. One of the things that you do is you look at what's the problem that we're trying to solve, what's the opportunity we're trying to understand, and you design a research project around that. We know there's other research firms that it doesn't matter what the research project is, they're always going to want to do a mail survey or a phone survey or an email survey because that's what they know how to do. You really try to pick the right method. In your white paper, you talk a little bit about what you found to be successful relative to pursuing these growth opportunities. And we look forward to hearing your thoughts on that, Steve.
Oh, you bet. You bet. Yeah, we use a range of methods. Yeah, first of all, to reiterate what Dave said, yeah, different. There's a range, as you might imagine. There's a range of data collection methods that includes online surveys, regular mailed surveys. We also do focus groups and one-on-one interviews. We do what's called IDIs, or in-depth interviews. We usually do that by phone, or we use Zoom or Teams. There's also intercepts and door-to-door. And the way to, how to choose which one, it depends a lot on time and cost, and also the available, the counts that are available and accessible. If you do, doing door-to-door in a larger community wouldn't be feasible cost-wise. But what we land on for these growth opportunity needs assessment studies is phone interviews. Those are the most efficient and effective way to reach people in the communities where you don't have contact information, you don't have the phone numbers or other ways to access them. usually used to reach the smaller, more difficult populations. And but also phone interviews are great because you get that qualitative information. You can ask those open-ended questions with good callers. They can probe and clarify and pull in those details that support the quantitative metrics. An example would be for good probing and clarifying. If a respondent says my internet's unreliable, what does that really mean? We need to ask, can you elaborate? Being unreliable, is it more like inconsistent speed, or are there outages? There's a big difference there. Another thing that, a lot of times respondents, they just want to give you a quick answer and let's move on. But with the right caller, they can pause and they can get them to think a little bit harder. If they say a quick answer like, I just love their service, now we need to ask, what is it that you love specifically, and then probe and clarify to get those details. And that's truly what helps us color up the data. It's not just data, but we've got supporting qualitative findings that really color it up and give us the answers, detailed answers. I touched on experienced interviews. So we have really good interviewers, and it's important to have those because, if they know the topic, if they know the industry, they know how to probe and clarify well. They can facilitate the interview really smoothly. They balance humor, professionalism, and kindness with persistence, which is necessary because when you have a list, if it's a smaller list, you want to make the best use out of that list and make sure they get as much out of a phone list as they can. Good callers can do that because they get higher cooperation rates. And then, as I've touched on a few times already, they know how to probe and clarify really well.
Awesome. Great information, Steve. And some those attending may be looking at doing research themselves. A lot of what you shared can help them with any of their research projects that they're doing in-house. Others may be looking at who they might want to turn to for research. What should the audience expect from a research partner as far as deliverables go?
Well, for one thing, it's very important to expect recommendations on how to apply the findings. That's something that gives you those aha nuggets, the thing that you're looking for, that the new information that you don't already know or you don't strongly suspect. You want that new stuff. That's what you're investing in. You're investing in that new information, things that you don't already know. And if you have an experienced research practitioner, they will know how to find that information, and then recommend things. How to use the findings. Marketing wise, things to put in your messaging, channels where you should be promoted. All those things can be recommended and driven by the data that's produced out of the research. And then another important thing is to factor in all data collectively, not just data from a few questions. What I mean by that is, with non-customers, we'll ask them a lot of questions about how they feel currently. How's the experience currently with their current provider? And we get a good read on that with the rating scales, the Net Promoter Score, and also the open end to support that. If they're not unhappy, if they aren't unhappy with their current provider, then we need to factor that into the forecasted take rates. If they, when it comes to that question about how likely would it be to switch from your current provider to our client, if they say, "Oh, I might or might not," well, we go and we look at, what did that group say in the satisfaction type questions, and maybe they're on the fence, but we think they're teetering toward the low and the negative end if they're happy now. So that really factors into our forecasts. And then asked to see differences by behavioral and demographic segments. Behavioral would mean that would relate to internet activity. Are they what we call power users or basic users? There's now even the super power users, and so there's a lot of difference in their interests, in their need for speed, and their need for good tech support. People that are working from home that use the internet a lot and rely on it. There's critical things that they're doing. They have to have 100% uptime. close to that. So we look at differences between high and low activity in households. And of course, we look at demographic segment differences, usually by age group and then the size of the household. Those are kind of the two major things. Oftentimes there's differences shown by location as well. And then request the raw data file in crosstabs. Crosstabs are the tables, kind of the easy to use Excel tables. It's in Excel and it's got columns where you can see the segments by column, and they flag the differences between the segments. And you know, sometimes our clients rely on us, or they always rely on us to do it for them, and we do, but there's always a lot more data, available than we have, you know, are able to present. And so I encourage everyone to ask for that and find time to dig into that, and then ask the researcher, can you help me interpret this? Can you help me understand this? You can ask more questions about the survey findings if you have that data.
Excellent. As we segue into getting ready for some Q&A, Steve, final thoughts. What are some of the key takeaways that you would like the audience to leave with today?
So yeah, the key takeaways, just kind of closing the loop from what I mentioned in the beginning, what I think is very important, of course, is to gather community insights first, rather than going into a community without knowing all the information you can know to make the right decisions and to steer you on the right path for success. And then use that due diligence to ensure research data is accurate and representative. And we went through some of the things that will help increase and optimize accuracy in the sampling plan for representativeness. And then demand thorough deliverables, as I just touched on, with those actionable recommendations, those aha nuggets that you need and that you're looking for as the return on your investment in the research, you know, rather than just a kind of a regurgitation of things that you already knew before doing the research.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Want to open it up now for some questions, and you can always send us questions after the webinar if you don't want to ask during the webinar. Dawn had put the link to the white paper. Many of you already have that. If you have questions after that, please reach out. Don't hesitate. We love to talk about research. And so if you have questions, specific questions, don't worry about us charging or anything like that. We love to have those conversations. Steve, first question for you is around some of the core questions that you really have found work well in combination, it looks like, when you look to study a potential area for investment if you're going to move out of area. So you hit on net promoter score, customer satisfaction, but it sounds like also you like to roll into that awareness. So awareness of the company, and then some likelihood to switch questions. Is that right? Did I hear that right? Those are the core combination, and then you always adjust that according to the situation. But are some of the core questions you like to ask in these successful research projects you've done?
Yeah, a good combination of the questions that produce the metrics. Then you can see the prevalence of sentiment, positive sentiment versus negative. And then the open ends that support, whether it's a high positive sentiment or a negative sentiment. It's the logical combination and the combination that we use in nearly every survey that we do, every study that we do.
And internet performance is another question that you've had good success with too, correct?
Yeah, we ask a standard question about, whether they, what is your opinion about your current internet service? Is it consistently fast enough to meet the needs of everyone in your household or your business?
Yeah.
It needs improvement? It's inconsistent. You'd like to see some improvement, or is it just definitely way too slow and unreliable? So there's those three responses, and when we see the percentages of that, we get a quick look at just how happy the market is, the community is, and that. But we don't take that as the only metric. Obviously, we have other questions that we combine that with and factor it in with, again, with those open-ended questions that really give the rich details. So we just get a full picture.
Okay, great. Thank you. And you really saw that in your two examples. One market, it just, the clients were the potential market, they were not happy with the current providers, not happy with the needs. There was good awareness of the potential new entrants. It just checked a lot of the boxes that would be a good move. And awesome that you were able to report that they're seeing the results that the research told them they could expect. And so that's rewarding, I know, for you when you loop back with clients and find out how things are going.
That's true.
Let me ask you this. You do so many studies. You do a lot of research around the country. We see our competitors investing in their operations and customer experience and other things. What are you seeing as far as competitors? You shared those lower net promoter scores and how they compare to what a typical rural broadband provider will see. But are they getting stronger, weaker, neutral? What are you seeing as far as the types of companies our clients tend to compete against?
Yeah, they're over the years, having worked with Pivot for more than 10 years now. Yeah, I've seen the sentiment grow. I've seen the satisfaction increase. Not in leaps and bounds, but among the tier one providers. I showed that example of it being a net promoter score of -23 and their ratings of 6 to 7. Those used to see those more in the ratings, the satisfaction ratings in the 5s. And we've seen net promoter scores as low as -65, and so -23 is an improvement, but that's a ways away from getting to that average that we see at 41 of a net promoter score with our rural broadband clients. So they're still at quite a distance, but they are catching on. They are figuring out the customer experience, and they're taking measures to improve customer experience. It's evident, it's obvious that that's happening. So competition's increasing. That's for sure.
Thank you for that. Looking at other questions. A question around pricing. Many clients are looking at their pricing relative to competition and where opportunities are. How does research have a role in helping to make decisions around pricing strategy?
Oh yes, absolutely. And I used to do in the old days, I used to do a lot of pricing studies for companies like HP, and we use a few different methods. We used to use conjoint. I've used that a few times with our rural broadband clients, and they've turned out amazingly well. The thing about pricing, though, it's kind of a study in and of its own, because it takes time to ask the necessary questions to get accuracy with price curves and price elasticity. But we have slipped some basic questions in. One type of question is called the Van Westendorp, and we use a variation of that where we ask this of the price sensitive folks. We first ask what's their likelihood to switch to a speed tier package at this price, and if their likelihood is relatively low, our follow-up question asks them, what keeps you from being more likely to switch to the provider, to that package. And if they say price, we follow that up with a couple of Van Westendorp type questions. The first one, we want to understand at what price does it need to come down to be in the ballpark where you consider it. And then we follow that up with, now what price would you definitely buy it at or subscribe at? Which really is kind of the slam dunk definitely would price. And again, this is asked only of folks that said price was an issue. So we can develop a price curve that shows that relative range somewhere between price X, where they definitely subscribe to price Y, which is where it would be in the ballpark, it doesn't have to be at the slam dunk price. It's somewhere in the middle, or it could even be the price where it gets into the ballpark. And so we're able to do that price curve, and the band I've seen range from anywhere from $5 a month to $20 a month, without disclosing the exact price because they vary by market.
Thank you, Steve. This was some powerful tools when we talk about helping to make some pricing decisions. I've personally done, looking at the questions here, potential questions to tee up for you. And there's a question around qualitative versus quantitative, and to a non-researcher, you probably need to define those briefly. But it makes me think of focus groups, and I've done probably 200 some focus groups I've moderated around the country, and you've done a ton too. And I think about some of the fun, I mean, in rural America, where you do a lot of these focus groups, there's not a facility. So you're at a bank conference room, you're in a hotel conference room, or I remember one time I was in the side room of a local pub, and one of my focus group participants showed up early, and I had a few too many beers. So that was one of probably my biggest challenges, was moderating a focus group with a drunk guy in it. That got interesting, but we were able to mitigate him as a nuisance.
I'll bet he was really honest though.
Yeah, he was brutally honest.
Well, I've had that experience, Dave. Back in the early to mid '90s, we used to serve wine at the focus group. So,
oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Focus group was provide that. Yeah, so I've seen some of those people. Yeah,
times have changed.
Well, some people it does well. They open up and they talk more.
Maybe we should bring that back. Too much insurance liability. Talk a little bit about qualitative and quantitative briefly, and is there still a role for both in research?
Yeah, there absolutely is. Yeah, quantitative. We mix in the qualitative in the phone interviews. That it works really well with those follow-up open ends. When you're doing online surveys, it's typically considered all quantitative. We still get good open-ended responses, but you don't have that dynamic where you can probe and clarify and really dig deep and get those details. But when you use quantitative is usually when you have a good understanding of what your question set should be, and you can anticipate the different various responses that they'll have for the most part, because most of your questions are those closed-ended questions where you prompt them. With a qualitative survey, deciding or a qualitative methodology, the point at which you decide on that is when you're really trying to discover or uncover something new that you can't really anticipate the answer. So you need to spend time with either one at a time, one person at a time, or with a group of people, in a focus group setting, to really have that dynamic and spend enough time. A qualitative session gives you enough time, at least a half an hour, and for a focus group up to 2 hours. It gives you all that time to probe and clarify and hear all the different ways that people might respond, and you get a chance to probe and clarify using different follow-up questions. And they're usually recorded. You record them, you do transcripts, and you analyze all the details that come out of that. Gives you a really rich understanding, and we use it most often with brand perception studies. We want to dig deep. We want to understand, what people's values are. We want to understand, how they feel when they think of the provider, when they think of the name ABC Communications. What do you think of? How does it make you feel? Where do you see that brand name around your community? When you see it here, what do you think of? You get to ask all those different questions that in the end you can dissect in your analysis all the different variations and what channels are important and what makes the one channel or one message more effective than another channel or message. You get all those details from that.
Steve, I think we have time for one more question here, and we've got to make sure we let people go before the top of the hour, as people have other meetings, I'm sure. The last question, and sorry, we don't have a lot of time for it, is around minimum sample size. When I do a study out of area or for MVNO or pricing, should I have 30 respondents, 100 respondents, 200? Give us thoughts on an appropriate sample size.
Yeah, what you're trying to do, the sample by definition is a sampling of the population. So you want to talk to enough people that you're representing a population. So I mean the statistical threshold is 35 people. That's where you can say it's, it can be statistically representative. Um,
Some level.
but
Yeah.
but this size really drives your acceptance of risk. You can, as I mentioned, you can be more confident the larger your sample size. If it's a sample size of 35, you have to make sure you have enough open-ended and qualitative questioning to really get something good out of that. But with 35, if you had half of them, 50% say that they're likely to switch from their current provider to a new provider, then your confidence interval makes that in reality to represent the population it could be between 35% and 65% in the population because your confidence interval widens out. Now, if you have a sample size of 200 or more, it tightens up. So if 50% say they're likely to switch, it tightens up closer to 45 to 55%. So you have a more confidence in the accuracy of that representation of the entire population.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Don, before I turn it over to you for last thoughts, just want to say thank you to everyone who's attended today. Please keep us in mind for your research needs. We'd love to talk to you about any projects you have, whether it be new opportunities you're pursuing, new products you're looking to offer. If you've got any challenges within your existing market, maybe customer pressure within your traditional markets. Or one of the other popular things that we do a lot of research in is follow-ups on repairs and installs and how that customer experience is going. So if you have any of those needs, please reach out. We'd love to talk to you about that. Thank you again for your time today.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining
Before
us.
you leave, before everyone leaves, I am going to do a shameless plug for our brand camp webinar tomorrow at 11 Pacific. If you've been tuning into brand camp this summer, it's been super fun. It's our second to last webinar. So I'm stealing some airtime to promote that. I just put the link in the chat. Wow, Dave, you are on it. We'd love to see you guys tomorrow. I will send the recording for this by Friday, and I'll also link the white paper as well. So thank you all. Have a great rest of your Wednesday.
Thanks, everyone.